What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. DMZ Season 2 is where it's at, and today we'll be covering Tier 1 missions for the new Crown faction which was introduced in Season 2. Now we've already done this similarly for Legion and White Lotus, and the Tier 1 missions for Crown are not that difficult, although slightly stepped up above the previous two factions that I just mentioned. Nonetheless, we will cover each one of these missions in short snippets, giving some tips for you to get through this fast and solo so you can get onto Tier 2 and onto better stuff. Now first up and starting us off is a mission called Arms Trading. This expects three things from you. First of all, to kill 20 Alcatala soldiers, and then second and thirdly to extract their weapons, namely 2 Kastov 74Us and 2 Vesnev 9Ks. Now the weapons kit of the Alcatala soldiers are these two weapons as well as RPK, shotguns and so on, but after going through 20 of these soldiers you will absolutely have the required amount of weapons needed to extract. Now in terms of where you need to be going to do this, I haven't been able to find any Alcatala soldiers on Ashika Island since this is all just Shadow Company, so absolutely you need to be heading to the old map Al Mazrah, and there 99% of the enemies that you kill will be Alcatala. Going in with a primary and having a free slot as well as your backpack available, you'll be able to drag 2 of these 4 required weapons out per extraction, which means that you need a minimum of 2 to 3 drops in to get this done. Next up at number 2 is Golden Ticket. Now this mission essentially expects you to extract a Building 21 access keycard. Building 21 is of course the second location that was added in Season 1 Reloaded. And generally speaking, there are many ways in which you can acquire this card, but the 3 most direct routes would be to kill the Commander Hilo. 9 out of 10 times you will find a Building 21 access card in the crate that falls out of the destroyed helicopter. Likewise, around the 10 minutes left mark on Al Mazrah, you will see supply crates dropping onto the map. Generally speaking, these also have a high chance of having one of these cards on. And then last but certainly not least, you can also buy these cards from certain buy boxes. Now the price is super high. I believe it's 30k on Ashika Island and 40k on Al Mazrah, but nonetheless, as you can see in the footage in the background here, I opted for that route. I farmed out the 40k, bought the card, and then extracted to get mission completion. The third mission is Non-Discriminatory, and this has 2 parts. First part expecting you to kill 8 Alcatala soldiers, and then the second part expecting you to kill 5 Shadow Company soldiers in the same deployment. Now this means you need to be dropping onto Al Mazrah to do this. There are no Alcatala soldiers to speak of, or at least that I've found on Ashika Island, so you will need to do this in the first location, Al Mazrah. Now once you do that, again 99% of the enemies that you kill on the Al Mazrah map are Alcatala soldiers, so you'll be able to get those 8 super easy. Now to get Shadow Company, the easiest is to go to the new area that was added in Season 2 that is part of City Caves here. Essentially you have a giant cargo plane that has crashed here and scattered its shit all over the place, and you will find Shadow Company crawling all over this area. You only need 5 of them, so enter in from the north, kill them around the wreck of the cargo plane, and you'll be done. The fourth mission, called Recon Flyover, expects us to acquire a recon drone, tag 10 enemies with a recon drone at Hafid port specifically, which is on Al Mazrah, and then in the third mission requirement we need to kill 10 enemies at the same location at Hafid port with a suppressed weapon. Now specifically when it comes to the recon drone, of course you can find these around in the map, and I would advise you to go to armories and look for them there if you don't have one with you, but of course you can also drop into the map with a recon drone equipped. So simply then head on over to Hafid port, find yourself a place where you can hide where enemies can't find you, since there seems to be something new in Season 2 that when the enemies see a recon drone, it makes them essentially aggressively approach where the recon drone is coming from, aka where you're lying on the ground with the fucking iPad out. So be careful of that. Find an area where you can deploy this recon drone and then simply fly around and tag these enemies. There are tons of enemies hanging around at Hafid port, so you should have no problem, but you can also re-tag the same enemies after waiting a while for their tag to fade. Once you've done those 10, you can simply throw away the drone and switch to your suppressed weapon. In my case, I was using an M4, and mow these enemies down. Now bear in mind, you don't need to do all these 3 things at the same time within the same deployment. In my case, I actually did the suppressed weapon kills long before I completed the recon drone tagging. But either which way, once you complete all 3 of these, you'll be done with the mission. Then speaking of M4s and moving us on to mission number 5 is M4 weapons testing. This mission has 2 parts to it. The first one expecting us to kill 10 enemies from a distance larger than 100 meters with a M4 weapon type. And then you also need to kill 1 enemy player, 1 operator with an M4 as well. Now in the background right now, you can see the M4 that I configured specifically for this mission and dragged in as my insured weapon, but you don't need to do this. Floor loot, floor M4s will also work just fine for getting progress on this mission. Nonetheless, in the first part of the mission, find an area of the map where you either have the high ground or where you have long distance sight lines, and simply ping the AI and then adjust your distance manually and pop off on them. I specifically did this in her feed port, which might not have been the best decision since her feed port has a lot of missions and a lot of extractions around it these days in season 2. But nonetheless, pick an area that you can do this without being disturbed too much by enemy players, and you should be able to rack these 10 kills up relatively fast. Now, as for the operator kill, the M4 weapon is not a piece of shit. It is a very, very decent assault rifle, so you should be able to mop up an enemy player, a human being, quite easily with whichever version of this weapon that you have. I was quite lucky. I literally had someone run past me, not seeing me, and I just mowed them down. But you should be able to do this relatively easily. If you're not familiar with the M4 or you don't feel comfortable with it, remember that you can use any other weapon to down, and as long as you finish with the M4, you will get this credit and you're done. That brings us to the 6th mission under tier 1 for the Crown faction, called Whistleblower. Most players will end up skipping this mission due to the fact that it is quite difficult and all of its tasks need to be done on Ashika Island, the new area introduced in season 2. This area is super popular right now, obviously, because it's brand new, and it is quite difficult with the amount of enemy players that are roaming around trying to do this mission as well as other objectives. The other reason is also that this mission requires the use of a key, namely the City Hall hideout key, and of course if you lose this key, then you're not able to progress in the mission and you have uno problemos. Now first things first, the tier 1 mission Health Conscious for the Legion faction actually gives you one of these keys, so that is your most direct route to having one of these keys in your inventory. Otherwise, you can also find these on Ashika Island. Well, technically speaking, you can find them anywhere, but killing HVTs and going into strongholds has a possibility of also rewarding you with one of these keys. Now, to give you an idea of how difficult it is to farm this, in about 30 to 35 deployments onto Ashika Island, I have found one other copy of this key, and that is probably the reason why this is frustrating, or could be frustrating for players, because if you lose that key, it is going to be difficult finding another one. Even though this guide is created from a solo perspective and I did it solo, there is no shame in butting up with randoms or other players to do this, since that way at least you can have some additional fallback in case something goes awry. But nonetheless, if you have the key and you're ready to rock, you are expected to take the governor's laptop from the Ashika Island Town Hall, which is the key. You're going to need to open up that town hall so you can get to the laptop. Then you have to take the laptop across the street to a dead drop, which is right above the beach club, and throw it in there. And you also need to throw a screwdriver into the dead drop in the same deployment. Now, you absolutely need to do all of this in one go. There are some missions which are currently bugged. This is unfortunately not one of them. I tested this, so you have to be throwing a screwdriver as well as the laptop into this dead drop. As soon as you spawn in, you're going to be making your way towards this area of the map. This is the town hall that you need to get into, and right between this round structure here and the service station sits the dead drop that you need to deposit the screwdriver as well as the laptop into. Now, as you make your way towards there, and I would consider that you should hasten and do that as fast as possible to kind of avoid players that are setting up there to ambush people that come to do the mission, as well as other players that might do the mission, because there is only one laptop. As you get close to the area, do loot some toolboxes along the way and try and find yourself a screwdriver. But once you get to the town hall, it's time to go to work. Once you pop the bottom open, this is a standard issue stronghold kind of setup. So you have some tier 3 elites rather running around, which are quite difficult to kill. These are Shadow Company guys, so they're fucking rough. But also you have some shield guys. So as you go in, pop off on these guys, use elevation, move in between the floors and gunfight them down, and clear out as much of this AI as possible so that you can move on to phase 2 of the plan, which is on the ground floor going into this desk area here, area, and that is exactly where you will find the governor's laptop. Now, once you have this laptop, simply hightail it across the road, as mentioned, to behind that service station, and that is where you're going to find the dead drop where you throw the laptop into. Now, I was super fortunate that when I went into the service station right next to this dead drop, I found a screwdriver in a toolbox in there. Maybe the same can happen for you, but that is of course not guaranteed since it's RNG what are in these toolboxes. Once you do all of this, you will get instant completion. You don't need to extract anything like that, and that will get this relatively difficult mission done and dusted. Then last but surely not least, we have the penultimate mission for the Crown faction in tier 1, the final mission called Piracy. Now, this mission expects you to go to her feed port. You have this cargo ship in her feed port, which you need to board. This cargo ship is considered a stronghold area, so you will find a lot of enemies here, including enemies with riot shields. So absolutely come prepared. Now, this area essentially is deck upon deck upon deck stacked on the ship. So fight your way through this. Take it slow if you have the time, and essentially move your way up to the very tippy top of this cargo ship, and you will find the shipping manifest on this rack over here. Now, you need to extract this shipping manifest, so grab it off the rack, hightail it to the nearest extraction site, get that done, and you're done with tier 1 of the Crown faction. The other thing you're also done with is this video. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. Let me know if any of the missions gave you a little bit of trouble, and if there's any additional hints or so that I can give you. Of course, check out the channel for the other factions, tier 1s as well. I'm busy starting to produce tier 2 and tier 3 content now, so absolutely check back on the channel for that, as well as any videos that you need on key locations, which I pretty much have almost all of them covered. I'm also working on the Ashika Island ones. Other than that, it's just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.